it's going to be Jiffy. Calm down. Self busy doing something. To your mind. Give it space. For now, just breathe it out. Now.
What's up guys, I'm Theo, and today is another video about Windows programs. Now, we've already done free programs you've never heard of, we've done free software you'll really want, but this time we're going to do 15 essential Windows programs that are good to have on every computer, and hopefully you already have most of these. So you've definitely seen me mention all of these before at some point, but never all at once. So if you don't use some of these, well, you'll have some cool new programs to get. And if you do have all of these already, congrats, you must be a computer expert. Okay, so let's go through these programs arranged by category to make things simpler. So to start off, we have media players. The two I'd recommend here are VLC Media Player and Media Player Classic. Both of these video players, especially VLC, will be capable of playing pretty much every type of video or audio file you can possibly imagine. I'd say you can probably get away with just VLC, but I like Media Player Classic too because sometimes I've found it can handle certain huge video files better. And also, sometimes VLC plays video with a weird washed out look for some reason, where I've never had that issue with MPC. So I'd really consider both of these together as being essential in any computer. Okay, next up, let's talk about productivity. I'm gonna skip talking about Office Suite programs like Microsoft Office because that's just too obvious. Instead, one program I consider essential here is Notepad++. It's basically like Windows Notepad on serious steroids. Not only can you use it for basic notes taking, but it also has support for basically every coding language. So if you ever have to open up a source code file, Microsoft Office, because that's just too obvious. Instead, one program I consider essential here is Notepad++. It's basically like Windows Notepad on serious steroids. Not only can you use it for basic notes taking, but it also has support for basically every coding language. So if you ever have to open up a source code file or a markup language file like XML, it will show it correctly formatted with color coding and everything. It would take all day to try and go through all the features, but you can probably see just how much more options it has than regular Notepad already. It even has support for plugins you can install, so there is almost no limit to what it can do. Alright, moving on to file storage, we have two programs to mention. First is Dropbox, which I'm sure you've heard of and hopefully use. It basically creates a folder on your desktop that stays synced to the cloud, and you can then sync the folder to all your other computers. It's easily one of my favorite programs, not just because it's convenient to have access to anything I put on there, but also because it serves as a good extra form of backup. They do have a free tier with 2 GB of storage, which is good enough for storing a ton of documents and stuff, or there's a paid version with 2 TB for $10 a month. So if you have any critical files that you absolutely must never lose, like, I don't know, tax return, files and stuff like that, it might be good to get the free version at the very least, put all that super important stuff on there, and then you have access to it, you know it's safe. But of course, backup is really important in general. So the next program, as for true backup, there is one service I'd recommend and I use, but it's not free. It's called Backblaze. It's $60 a year and does unlimited online backup totally automatically, and it really is unlimited. I have several terabytes backed up because of all my drives on the computer. Backing up your data is absolutely essential, so if you don't back up your data in some way, whether it's an external drive or another online backup service, you'd better do something. All hard drives fail, so if you have all your important stuff in only one place, you're playing with fire. On to the next program. I'd categorize this as miscellaneous, but it is Flux. I've probably mentioned this one 100 times in the past, but here it is again. It basically dims and tints your computer screen orange at night, so it should drastically reduce any sleep disruption your computer might normally cause you at night. This is because our brains associate blue wavelengths of light with daytime, so looking at a bright screen can severely disrupt when you'd normally get tired at night. You can choose the strength of the effect, and I basically have it on the stronger settings, which can seem weird at first, but I almost guarantee you'll get used to it and wonder how you ever lived without. Okay, next up, if you do any file sharing like BitTorrent, the essential program here I'd say is called QBitTorrent. It's basically the current best lightweight torrent client. In the past, it was uTorrent or MicroTorrent, but apparently that was bought out and got stuffed with ads, so this is the new best option. I don't really download torrents too often these days, but when I do, this is what I use. And obviously, you should never use it for piracy or downloading copyrighted content illegally, but I'm sure none of you would ever do that, right? Alright, now onto the file compression category. You really have two options, either 7-zip or the famous WinRAR. Both of these are really good, though I personally prefer WinRAR. They both support all compressed file containers you'd come across, like RAR files, zip files, 7-zip files, and all that, both creating and extracting from them. 7-zip is totally free, but as you probably know, while WinRAR is technically only a free trial, it lets you keep using it forever even after the trial program. Now, obviously, if you like WinRAR, you should really just pay for it, a license to support it. And yes, I actually did pay for WinRAR. I know, you probably thought that doing that was just a myth. But yeah, either of these is pretty essential because of how common compressed file containers are, and they're both really good programs. Okay, now for a fun category, gaming. These days, the most popular voice and text chat program out there is Discord, so it's definitely essential. You basically create a server, which is free, and all your friends can join and use it for various voice chatting or just sharing links or whatever in the text chat. It's pretty self-explanatory, but it does allow a ton of other features if you have a bigger server, like user roles and permissions and bots, whatever else you can think of, really. Next gaming program I'm sure everyone knows is Steam. I mean, I really don't think I need to explain this one, but of course it is essential, so I had to mention it. These days there are lots of other game publishers all trying to create their own game stores, like Epic Game Store, Origin from EA, Battle.net from Blizzard, but I think we can all agree those are all trash and hate when they're exclusive released on them, because most of us probably have all of our games on Steam. The third gaming related app I'd say is essential is OBS. Now, this is often used for live streaming games you're playing, but I know only a small fraction of people actually do streaming. So the reason I'd consider this essential is because it's useful not just for streaming games, but also for other uses like general screen recording. It really is versatile and lets you do stuff like screen recording while also showing a webcam, which is good for producing informational type videos, presentations, or whatever, and also allows so much customizations like adding images, video sources, screen capture sources, all that onto what you're recording. Now, I would say it has a pretty steep learning curve to take full advantage of it. So for example, if you don't even know what bitrate means, then you might just want to find an easier option, but still, it's a powerful free program with a ton of uses. All right, now onto some useful utilities. First up, we have O&O Shut Up 10, and I actually made an entire video about this because it's so useful. but it basically lets you fix all the annoyances with Windows 10 in one place. So you might know that a lot of people hate Windows 10 because of privacy concerns especially, but Shutup 10 gives you a huge list of toggles you can use to disable pretty much anything you'd ever want in terms of privacy in Windows 10. So there's a list of what's recommended to disable and ones you might just want to consider because it might be a useful feature that you actually want to keep on. And I'll put a little pop-up of the video I made going more in depth on it if you want to check that out. The next utility is called ShareX, which, like the name suggests, makes it really easy to share stuff with friends or anyone, whether it's a screenshot, a file, some text, whatever. You can see when you right-click on the taskbar icon, you get a huge menu of features, most of which I don't even use, to be honest, but one I like especially is the ability to take a screenshot, then it immediately uploads it to a service you choose and copies the link to the clipboard all at once. So I have it linked with Push, but you could attach it to your Imager accounts or others, for example. And you can also right-click any file as long as it's below a certain size, and it will do the same thing with the file, so you can just send that to friends via the link. There's also a bunch of other random tools built in, like a color picker, a ruler, QR code tool, and other stuff. So yeah, definitely useful, and I always install it. Moving on, we obviously have to talk about antivirus. Now, for free antivirus software, there are actually a decent number of options, but if you know what you're doing, probably the built-in Windows Defender is fine enough. But there are free versions of a lot of paid antivirus software you can find. As for paid antivirus, this is probably going to offer you more protection at a price, of course. These days, there's not really any best antivirus, and even if there was, it pretty much changes every year. So if you want a paid antivirus, I would just recommend going on AV-Test and see which antivirus tested the best most recently. But at least at the moment, they all seem to perform similarly anyway, so just go with whichever one you seem to like the best. And finally, we're on to web browsers, and realistically, you have one of two options, either a Chromium-based browser or Mozilla Firefox. Chromium-based browsers include Google Chrome, Brave browser, and even Microsoft is building a Chromium version of their Edge browser. All of these Chromium browsers should perform similarly because they're based on the same underlying code, and they all should support Chrome extensions equally. Of course, the other big contender is Firefox, especially Firefox Quantum, which is basically their revamped version they released a little while ago. So until Microsoft puts their Edge Chromium browser as the Windows default, I'd still consider it essential to get a better browser, really just because of all the plugins, which are so darn useful. So if you have all the programs we just went over, congratulations! You can now legally consider yourself a certified computer expert. Be sure to leave a comment telling us that. If you want even more cool programs, I'll put a couple links on the right-hand side here you can just click on, and I'm sure you'll find these useful. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. What is up, everybody? It's time for another cool programs video, and today I've got a whopping 10 of them, all free programs for Windows. So you should at least find some of them useful, even if you don't need all of them, and of course I'll put all links in the description. Before we jump in, of course I have to do my usual plugs. If you haven't seen my truly amazing Instagram account, you're really missing out. It has the most hilarious tech memes you could possibly imagine, so be sure to check that out. It's just @TheoJoe over on Instagram. With all that out of the way though, let's get started. So, number one is a program called Qt Tab Bar, which adds a feature to Windows Explorer that honestly Microsoft should have added years ago, but somehow has not, which is tabbed Explorer windows. Instead of having a bunch of individual windows that you need to switch between, you can just click a tab like you do in any web browser, which makes way more sense. Now, after you install it, one thing that took me a lot of searching to figure out is to actually enable it, you need to go to the taskbar View tab and then Options dropdown and actually click Qt Tab Bar to enable it, or else it won't show up. And also there are other command bar options you can click here to enable, but I don't like the look of those and I don't need them, so I just keep them disabled, but you might see those options here. But for the most part, after you enable it, Explorer should still look the same and behave the same, so just with some extra elements. So obviously you can see that the tabs are there now, and when you hover over folders now, sometimes there will be a little arrow showing internal folders if you hover over them, so you can just ignore them. I don't know if there's a way to turn that off. That's just part of the program. And to open a new tab, you just right click on a folder and click open in new tab, or you can middle click the folder and it will also open in a new tab. It might be a little bit faster, so it's very similar to how browsers work with multiple tabs. Alright, next up we have Music Bee, which is a music manager kind of like iTunes, but not. So if you don't have an iPhone, this could be a good option to keep track of all your music. It's got a nice looking modern interface and will automatically import your music and do all the usual stuff like organizing by album, artist, and all that. And it's also got a good amount of advanced features like multi-band equalizers, skins, tools for tagging and CD ripping, and even support for Winamp plugins. And yes, you can actually use it to sync with your phone if it runs Android, so it can definitely do a lot. Okay, for number 3, we have a cool one called GOG Galaxy, which is a universal game manager from the website GOG, aka Good Old Games, which, fun fact, is actually owned by the same company that developed the Witcher games and the upcoming Cyberpunk 2077. And this is actually the newly released GOG, aka Good Old Games, CD ripping, and even support for Winamp plugins. And yes, you can actually use it to sync with your phone if it runs Android, so it can definitely do a lot. Okay, for number 3, we have a cool one called GOG Galaxy, which is a universal game manager from the website GOG, aka Good Old Games, which, fun fact, is actually owned by the same company that developed the Witcher games and the upcoming Cyberpunk 2077. And this is actually the newly released GOG Galaxy 2.0 version. Basically, this program aims to let you connect all your different game services and manage everything from one place. So this includes Steam, Origin, Epic Games, and even console platforms like PlayStation and Xbox accounts. You're able to import all your games, friends lists, and achievements, and whatever else from all the various platforms. Now, each platform has different levels of integration, so with most platforms, you can at least see which friends are online, for example, and soon you'll be able to do cross-platform chatting. Some platforms like Steam also let you install and uninstall games right from GOG Galaxy, and even does cloud save backups for some games. There is a lot more it can do that I don't have time to go over in this video, but it's definitely worth checking out considering how many different game platforms there are these days. Up next, we actually have several programs, all part of a suite that I'll just count as one, which is known as sysinternals. And this is actually a set of tools created by Microsoft themselves for Windows, though it isn't included with Windows and has to be downloaded separately. There are a ton of programs in here, literally around 70 I think, so some more useful than others, so I'll just go over some of the more useful ones. And the good news is, most of these are standalone and don't require installation, you can just run them. One extremely powerful tool is called Process Monitor, which basically allows you to keep track and see exactly what actions every single process on the computer does, which is invaluable when trying to debug programs or figure out why something keeps crashing, for example. Now, I should warn you, this is only going to be helpful to advanced users, and most of you will probably have absolutely no idea what you're looking at. Hell, even I don't really know 99% of what it says, because it's kind of information overload. You're better off just reading tutorials dedicated on how to use this program, because I don't want to spend the whole video on it. Another useful program is Process Explorer, which you can kind of think of like a super version of Task Manager. It can do a lot of the same stuff, like seeing running processes, killing processes, but can do a lot more, like seeing which files a program is actively using, stuff like that. Again, you'll have to research the app separately to realize its full power. Then there are a ton of other little programs in the suite, a lot of which just serve single functions, and some of them are kind of funny, such as the one called Not My Fault, which literally is meant to purposefully crash the computer in a variety of ways to test things out. Just be sure to use that one responsibly if you decide to prank your friends with it. Okay, next up, for number 5, this one is actually similar to the Process Explorer tool I just mentioned, and it's called Process Hacker. This is pretty much the same idea, where it shows all running processes, can show parent-child process relations, and all that. But it is a bit more powerful with more options and abilities. For example, it has separate tabs not just for processes, but also services and network connections and disk activity. And you can also use it to see memory contents of different processes, which I won't pretend to understand, but some of you out there can probably take good advantage of it. And I've heard it's especially useful when it comes to diagnosing and removing viruses, if you have the know-how, of course. Moving on, number 6 is a popular one you might have heard of already, which is LibreOffice. It's essentially a free alternative to the Microsoft Office suite of programs, and this is another group of programs we'll just count as one. Some of the stuff it includes are Writer, which is a word processor, Calc for spreadsheets, Impress for presentations like PowerPoint, and also Draw for diagrams, Base for databases, Math for formulas, and some other stuff. And yes, it can actually open and save the same formats as Microsoft Office, like DocX for Word example. Though keep in mind, if you do a lot of complicated documents with lots of weird formatting, there might be the occasional formatting difference if it's opened in Word, but that's bound to be expected. Alright, up to number 7, we have the program Tree Size, which helps you map your hard drive and figure out stuff like where all your free space has gone. It's similar to another program I'm a big fan of called WinDearStat, but this one is just different, so you might prefer it. It will show you the size of different directories on your drive, and you can also see it as a visual representation to see nested directories, which are visually bigger based on storage size. I think I'd still prefer WinDearStat just because I'm familiar with it, but you might decide you like the look of this one better. Alright, number 8 is really cool, which is Game Save Manager, and it's pretty much just like it sounds. Its purpose is to let you automatically back up all your video game save files at once and restore them too. It should support pretty much every single game you can imagine, and they have a list on their website, and there's literally over 6,000 games on there, which is pretty crazy, and their website also shows the last time they updated the database. It's got a bunch of other cool features, like the ability to tie in with cloud services like Dropbox, the ability to do scheduled backups, and will also let you know if there's any special circumstances with certain games, like with Minecraft. It lets you know that it will back up the entire Minecraft world folder because it has to for a true backup, so obviously that might be more storage than you expect. So this is definitely one that could be useful if you ever need to move save files to a new computer or share them with friends or just back them up and you don't want to have to figure out where all the save files are. Coming near the end, we got a couple more still. So for number 9, we have MSI Afterburner, which is a very useful program for controlling your graphics card, including overclocking. And keep in mind, you can use this program no matter what graphics card you have. It doesn't have to be made by MSI. It will display a lot of information about the GPU, like current clock speed, voltage, temperature, fan speed, stuff like that. Then it makes it really easy to overclock just using some basic sliders like power limit, core voltage, temperature limits, core clock, and memory clock, and fan speed controls too. Now remember, just because the slider is there doesn't mean that you can just max everything out and expect it to magically triple your graphics power. You're better off looking up some overclocking guides for your specific GPU, because you probably can't increase these things as much as you imagine without making the system unstable. So maybe try increasing stuff just bit by bit, probably starting with power limit, which I've had reasonable success with, but be especially careful with the voltage limits because setting that too high could potentially damage your card. Again, you'll want to definitely do some research before messing around with this too much, even though it is very powerful. Alright, finally we're up to number 10, which could be the most useful of them all, and this program is called Super F4, and its purpose is to allow you to kill the foreground process if a program freezes or refuses to quit. Now, you probably already know if this happens, there are options such as using Control-Alt-Delete to bring up the task manager, but sometimes even that can be difficult, like if it's a full screen program that won't go away and is blocking you from even seeing the task manager. Pro tip though, in the task manager, you can enable the always on top option to make that less likely. In any case, if all else fails, Super F4 lets you just use the shortcut Control-Alt-F4 to force quit the application if it refuses to do so by itself or your task manager isn't working for whatever reason. This one definitely should come in handy. So those are 10 really cool free Windows programs worth checking out. If you want to keep watching, the next video I'd highly recommend is one I made recently going over 10 tips to make Windows run faster. You can watch that by clicking this little box right here. Also be sure to subscribe for new videos twice a week. And I'll see you in the next one. How's it going, guys? I'm Theo, finally got a haircut, Joe. And today we're going over 10 ways that you're using your computer completely wrong. You're gonna ruin everything, your computer's gonna explode. Just kidding. These are just gonna be 10 things that a lot of people do that aren't exactly the best way to use your computer. Some of these are just basic mistakes or just not exactly following best practices. We're gonna explain what those are and why you might wanna be doing things a little bit differently to improve your experience when using your computer. And a lot of these will just be for Windows and Windows 10 specifically, but some of them will apply to no matter what kind of of computer you're using. So starting off with the number one, everyone knows that if you have a problem with your computer, the first thing you should probably try is to turn it off and on again. It's like a meme at this point, but you might not realize that with Windows 10, there is a feature called Fast Startup that's enabled by default, and it actually makes it so if you actually use the shutdown command, then when you start it back up, it doesn't actually completely restart it the way you're probably thinking of it. Because this fast startup feature makes it so Windows by default will do more of a hibernation type thing, where it will save a lot of the running processes and stuff from the memory and put it onto the hard drive. So when the computer boots back up after doing a shutdown, it actually restores a lot of those same processes, so it doesn't take as long to restart everything up. So if you are restarting your computer by turning it off and on again, specifically to close everything out and fix something, the actual way you want to do it is to do the start menu and then restart, because that will actually clear everything out of the memory, not use anything that was in the previous running instance, and completely reset everything. Whereas if you just do a shutdown and then turn it back on, it might actually still be using things from the previous instance, and it might not fix the problem. Now you can disable the fast startup setting if you want, but I probably wouldn't recommend it. Most of the time it is useful if you want to just be able to much faster boot up the computer, so I wouldn't worry about disabling it. Just be aware that if you do want to restart the computer to fix something, actually do a restart. Okay, next up, number two, when you go to install new software, one thing most people do wrong is they don't read any of the actual options or the checkboxes, and they just kind of click next through everything, assuming that they need to have everything checked in order to install the program, which is usually almost never the fact. Sometimes you are actually required to check a box to agree to some terms of service, but a lot of times they'll also throw in other bloatware like, oh, I agree to install this toolbar, or I agree to install all this other crap that I don't need. And a lot of times they hide this between an advanced options setting or option. So usually what you want to do is, if you do have the option to install software using advanced options, I would just kind of click that, and usually it'll just have the default options set by default to select anyway, so you can just still click through. But when it's advanced options, you can usually see if they're kind of hiding anything in there and uncheck anything that you don't like. You might be surprised when you go to install something next time how many of these options, which you might have just clicked through previously, are not required at all and probably do something that you don't necessarily want. Okay, number three, one thing a lot of people do wrong is just using the default start menu without customizing it at all. With Windows 10, you can actually customize the start menu and the tiles on there a lot. You can remove everything if you want. You can add in whatever shortcuts you want. So I would actually go through and actually add common shortcuts to programs, folders you use very often, and that way you can really reduce the amount of clutter on your desktop. For example, you can have less icons on there in the taskbar. So for example, I have shortcuts to like all the library folders, like documents, pictures, videos, everything in there. I also have a lot of common like creative software on there that I can launch from there, stuff like that. You can see, you can also put widgets for the weather, email, stuff like that. And literally all you have to do is right click the different icons and you can remove it or drag them onto the start menu. So if you've been hating the start menu in Windows 10 because it looks so cluttered and there's a bunch of junk on there, realize you can remove all of that and put whatever you want on there and make it look however you want. Okay, number four, this one pretty much just applies to laptops in most cases, but one thing a lot of people don't do or do wrong is not encrypting their computer. If you're carrying around your laptop out in public places, you want to have that encrypted, so if you lose it or it's stolen, then no one can access any of the data that's on there. Now, there are a couple ways that this can possibly be done. If you have Windows 10 Pro or another Pro version of Windows like in Windows 8, you can actually use BitLocker, which is kind of like the more advanced encryption option, which you can select to encrypt certain drives and not encrypt other ones, but you do have to have a Pro version of Windows 10 for that. However, a lot of people don't realize there is another feature called device encryption that is supported on all versions of Windows, even Windows 10 Home, as long as your computer has the prerequisites hardware-wise. And this device encryption feature is more of a simplified version of BitLocker, where it's a lot more hands-off. It just automatically encrypts all of the computer, all the drives, and then you don't have to worry about it. Now, to check if your computer is compatible with this device encryption feature, go to the start menu and search for system information. You might have to start this as administrator for it to show, and look for where it says device encryption support, and hopefully it will say meets prerequisites. Otherwise, if it doesn't, then it'll tell you why it doesn't support it. For example, there are some harder requirements, like it requires what's called a TPM chip. It might require an SSD. I think at some point it did. So if it doesn't support it, it'll tell you the reason why. And if you know you do have a TPM chip, for example, if you're a little bit more advanced and it says you don't, you can check in the BIOS to see if it's maybe not enabled. But if it does say meet requirements, then what you can do is go to the settings and then update in security, and then look for a device encryption, and you can enable it there. All right, moving on to number 5. One thing a lot of people do wrong is just letting everything start up with Windows, never checking the startup programs, and then wondering why their computer is slower than when they first bought it. It's probably because a bunch of stuff you installed started up with Windows that wasn't there when you first bought the computer. And to stop things from starting up, it's very simple. All you do is go to the task manager, which you can bring up by pressing Control-Shift-Escape or Control-Alt-Delete and clicking task manager, and then go to the startup tab. And this will show you all the startup programs that are starting up with Windows and could potentially be slowing down your computer. And it might even show you, if it's able to measure it, how much startup impact each program has. So you can look for things that have a high impact and are taking up a lot of resources on startup, and you can uncheck it if you know you don't need it. Now, I wouldn't necessarily just go through and uncheck everything, especially if you don't know what something does. It might be sort of essential. So if you see a program that you know you don't need it starting up with Windows, then you can just uncheck it, and then it will only run, of course, if you start it yourself. All right, number 6, this is one thing people do wrong no matter what kind of computer you have, and it is reusing passwords. This is one of the worst things you can do, because in this day and age, obviously passwords get stolen all the time on leaked databases. You use a password on some website, the password database gets stolen, and then what hackers will do is they will either like literally sell or buy these stolen databases, and then they won't use that password database to log into the same site that you got it stolen from. They'll use those same password combinations in that database to try to log into other more important sites. So you might think, oh, well, this forum that I signed up to got hacked and they stole my password, but I don't care because I don't even care about that account. But what they're gonna do is check to see if that username and password are used in maybe a bank account. So if you use the same username and password or same email and password on other important accounts, then you just got it compromised because some other random low-level security website got hacked. So that's why it's super important to use unique passwords on every single website. And what you can usually do is have a kind of standard base password that you use that's easy to remember, you're never gonna forget, and then kind of come up with a way where you will modify that password based on whatever website you're on. So based on the name of the website, you might, I don't know, change your normal password in some way. That way you don't have to necessarily remember every single unique password you made for every single website, because you just have to remember the same method you use on each website. Hopefully that makes sense. Or you could use something like a password manager like LastPass, that's the one I use, and then you can just have it remember it for you, generate random passwords, and then you'll always be unique on each site. All right, moving on to number 7. This one is more relevant than ever because it has to do with using out-of-date or no longer supported versions of Windows, or really any operating system, but Windows for the most part. And the reason this is so relevant is because this year, right at the beginning of 2020, Windows 7, one of the most popular operating systems of all time, ran out of support. So Microsoft is no longer offering security updates. So this means if you're still using Windows 7, which is very old at this point, then if there is a new vulnerability that comes out that hackers can take advantage of, there is no way you're gonna be protected because you can't update and get it patched because there is no patch for it. So if you're using Windows 7, Vista, or God forbid XP, definitely just upgrade your version of Windows. Just bite the bullet. You're gonna have to upgrade anyway, and you'll be so much more secure for it. All right, so we're up to number 8, and one thing a lot of people do wrong is just using the default settings in Windows and not changing anything, or any operating system you're using. If you've never gone into your operating system settings and at least taken a cursory glance at some of the settings that you might want to change, definitely go in there and just kind of look around, see what settings are there. You might not even know what's there, and you might notice something, oh, I don't want it to look like that, or I don't want it to be like that, and then you change it. And there are so many different options I'm not going to get into in this video, that's beyond the scope of this, but I did make a couple of videos where I do talk about Windows settings to change, so I'll have that pop out if you want to click on that. And some examples might be in Windows Explorer choosing to show hidden files and folders, because a lot of times there are files and folders on your computer that you don't realize are there, but they might be hidden, and it's good to at least know that they exist. And another really important setting is to choose to show file extensions on all files. And that's so you can actually know exactly what file type you're looking at. And this can really come in handy, again, for security reasons. A lot of times what a virus maker might do if they're distributing a virus is they will create, I don't know, what's supposed to be a song file or something, and they'll name it whatever.mp3.exe. So if you don't have the final file extension showing, it'll show as .mp3. You think, oh, it's a file that's a music file. You run it, and then it runs an executable file. So it's good to know what actual file type you're dealing with in every case. And also, a lot of times, it's just good to know if you're dealing with a PNG file or a JPEG, instead of just saying, oh, it's an image file, and you don't even know what kind it is. Now, these last two are probably going to sound obvious, and I've talked about these so many times, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I have to mention them because a lot of you might be watching my videos for the first time. So number 9 is obviously backing up. If you don't have multiple backups of all your most important files, then you are using your computer completely wrong. You may as well not have those files in existence at all, because it's not a matter of if a hard drive will fail, it is when. All hard drives will fail, and you have to ask yourself, are you comfortable losing any data you have that is not backed up? And there are so many ways you can do it cheaply these days. There's unlimited online backup services, like I use Backblaze, for example. You can use something like Dropbox, which I also use. I put most of my important stuff in there, and then it syncs across all of my computers. So most of my important stuff is backed up in multiple places. And you could also use an external hard drive, where if my computer exploded or caught on fire, I would not lose any important data, and that just helps you sleep at night. You have to ask yourself, do you have data on your computer where it would be catastrophic if you lost it? And if you don't have any backups, I'm sorry, but you're being extremely dumb. So just get a backup. If you've been putting it off, just do it. And finally, number 10, this is another extremely important one, and a lot of people do this wrong by not updating Windows or your operating system, or really any software, right away when you get the opportunity. Now, this is different from the one I was talking about before, of using an outdated whole version of Windows. This is updating within your version of Windows, and by like putting off security updates and stuff, delaying them in Windows, which is hard to do these days, but some people do still try to do it. They try to delay Windows updates for no real reason. Now, I'm not talking necessarily about feature updates, which do make huge changes, mostly security updates. Now, if you have Windows 10 Pro, you can actually specifically delay security updates and feature updates individually, and I would never recommend delaying security updates, but you can if you want to delay the feature updates, which are usually the ones that cause bugs, and that's usually what I do, maybe by about a month. But the reason you never want to delay security updates is because a lot of times after a security bug or vulnerability is found, a lot of hackers will instantly jump on that and start to try to take advantage of it, but a lot of people just don't even know, or they think, oh, I don't need to stay up to date, and then they get hacked and wonder why. So yeah, enough rambling. Hopefully you don't do any of this stuff already, but now maybe you have some things that you realize you can make some changes, and you'll have a better computer experience from now on. So let me know what you think down in the comments. Did I completely miss something? We could talk about that down there. If you guys want to keep watching, the next video I'd recommend is one I made recently talking about different types of computer attacks, like phishing. There's also something called vishing, if you've never heard of it. So just more informational, fun stuff you can click on right there. I'll put that link. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next video. Well, yesterday, I got scammed. It happened. More specifically, I was a victim of fraud, and it was not my fault, but the way the scammers did this was very interesting. I've never seen anything like this before, so I figured it would be good to make a video about it, because I didn't do anything. It was all on the scammers' part, so this will be a good thing to look out for in the future, and also be interesting to know how some of these scammers work. So, the story begins yesterday, when I was working on a video that was going to be released today, and is obviously now delayed, but I look at my phone and I see that a couple minutes ago I received a text message that said a number is your shop pay code from, and then a name that I've never seen before. It was a store name. So my first thought was, well, that's weird. I did not place this order. Clearly someone must be trying to use some of my info to make an order, and it was clearly a Shopify platform code, because I could see that in the text message history, there was other text messages from other Shopify stores. If you're not familiar, Shopify is basically a platform where pretty much anyone can set up a store, and then they kind of do all the back-end stuff, including some of this text message stuff. So I'm like, well, I'm obviously not going to enter this code anywhere, but here's the problem. I then see that there was actually a notification from my credit card app saying that a $399 charge has gone through from that same company name that I've never heard of. And this really concerned me and confused me because I was not sure how they were able to put this order through if they did not have this code that was sent to me, this two-factor authentication code. I mean, credit cards get stolen, whatever, people place fraudulent orders, but how were they able to get through this code? That is the main thing that concerned me. So next, I go to check my email to see if there's any kind of order confirmation. Sure enough, there is an order confirmation from this same website, and I look and it's the typical Shopify type order confirmation page. And in Gmail, I can see that it actually does say it was sent via Shopify, so it is a Shopify store. And I'm looking at this, and I click on view my order to see some more info about it. Now keep in mind, normally I would never click on a link in one of these suspicious emails from a supposed order confirmation in case it was phishing, but seeing as it was via Shopify from Gmail, it said that, and the credit card charge literally already went through, I'm thinking it's a fraudulent charge, but the order confirmation is probably legit. So I click on the view order page. I see that they ordered some dumb stroller. I did not buy a stroller for $399, and weirdly enough, on the order confirmation page, all my information is correct. The shipping address, the billing address, the email address is all correct. They had all that info. So at this point, I'm even more confused because if they were trying to scam and buy something for themselves, they wouldn't put in my shipping address. So I go and actually Google this website, the name of it, and there's like 2 search results for it. There's like just the website itself, and then a couple domain registrar websites that just kind of list out a million domains. So there's no actual real search results for this appearing anywhere on the web. And the website itself is extremely sketchy. It's very bare bones. There's like a couple strollers on here. The title is just infant baby stroller for newborn and toddler. Like they clearly put no effort into this. I'm thinking this is a fake setup website. And you can even see on one of the pictures, there's like random Chinese writing, which is even more sketchy. So to confirm my suspicions, I look up the whois record for the domain, which is like, you can look up for any website info, including when the domain was created. And sure enough, this domain was created just a few days ago. So clearly this is telling me that this site was set up as a scam in itself. And probably the people who placed this order fraudulently are the same people who own the site, and that's why they didn't care if the shipping name was the same, because they were never going to ship anything out. They just want the order and the money to go through, and then they'll collect it on the other side. So obviously I call my credit card company, I tell them I didn't place this order, someone must have stolen my card, so they refund the order to do an investigation, they cancel the card, they send me a new one. But the main thing concerning me is still that two-factor authentication code that they never got. And I know it wasn't some sort of SIM swap because I never lost cell signal. Usually if someone steals your SIM card, then you lose the cell signal and it gets transferred to them. That never happened. I never lost that. So they didn't have the text message at all. So I go on Shopify's website, and they are not usually a customer-facing website. So I kind of dig through. I find a customer service number, and I call them and kind of explain, I'm not a store owner, I'm a customer. This is what happened, and I'm kind of trying to figure out why they were able to place this order without the two-factor authentication code. And the customer service rep was very understanding, very helpful, and they said they would be launching an investigation, whatever. They'd email me confirmation that they were looking into this, all that. So they took down all the info I gave them, like the name of the website, the order confirmation number, which was literally 1001. So it was literally the first order ever made on that website was a fraudulent order because they just add 1,000 in front of it. They also took down like my email address, my shipping info, and then that way they could like match it up with the other Shopify account on the back end, so they could just have all the info. And obviously they couldn't give any details on the investigation they were going to do. They couldn't like confirm anything, but they still took it all down to do the investigation, and they emailed me saying, but I do have a final working theory on what happened. It's just a theory, but I'll kind of break down some of the background. So basically, the first clue is the text message I got. It said your Shop Pay code. Now, Shop Pay is a feature in Shopify stores that's optional, and basically it allows someone to type in either their email address or their phone number into the checkout page, and then what happens is it sends a text message to the person who's tied to that account, and if they type in that code that they got into the checkout page, it will automatically fill out the rest of the information, like your name, address, whatever, so you don't have to type it in. However, one important detail that the customer service rep mentioned in email is that the Shop Pay code is actually optional. Even if you get sent the text message, you can still just manually fill out the details, like the name, the shipping address, all the info, and still place the order through. And because the scammer was literally running the site and they had control of the back end of it, I assume there's some setting they could change that would allow them to not require a phone number to go along with the order, so they could just type in all the info they had and still allow the order to go through. I also believe that these scammers probably already had my credit card info and all my other info from some other random data breach. And the reason for this is one strange coincidence that happened earlier this week, which is I got a letter from my credit card company saying that they would be replacing my credit card with the same exact type of credit card, but just a new account, and it didn't specifically say that it was because my credit card was stolen or potentially stolen, but it was weird to me because my credit card did not expire until like the end of the year. So I'm like, why are they replacing my card now if it doesn't expire yet? And it was being replaced with the exact same card. It wasn't like they were upgrading the card to a new type. And also, it wasn't like they said, oh, we're canceling your card, we're replacing it now. They said, you will get a new card in a few weeks, and when you activate it, the old one will be deactivated, and it'll be a totally new number. And what I'm thinking now is the credit card company, whatever fraud detection methods they have at the company, might have either seen my credit card show up in a stolen database, or they were able to somehow flag my credit card number as having been maybe used at the same place where other credit card users had used it and gotten stolen. So either way, somehow my credit card was flagged, and possibly that's why they were replacing it preemptively, even though it wasn't actually used for fraudulent transactions. But then right now, obviously, they were right, and it ended up being actually used before they were able to replace it. Again, that's just a theory, but I think the timing and the coincidence is just too much, and it does make sense. So knowing all this in context, I think I've come up with a theory on a timeline of events of how all this happened. First, I think my credit card was stolen in some kind of data breach. The reason being because of the weird coincidence of the credit card company saying they're going to replace my card for no specific reason, and I do not believe that the vulnerability was in Shopify itself. So I think the credit card was stolen ahead of time. Then the scammers set up a domain specifically to be used to cash out on these credit cards that they probably have stolen, and set up this generic Shopify store, threw on some expensive products, and would use that to order using the credit cards. And I definitely believe this is the case because of how recent the domain was set up and how sketchy and generic the website is. It's clearly some boilerplate thing they just threw up there. Then what I believe happened is they went to enter all my info, all my real info, into the checkout page on their site. And I believe they used my real info because a lot of fraud checks through Shopify and other credit card processors look for consistencies in billing address, shipping address, email address even, to make sure all the account info lines up. So I believe they had to use all the correct info to make sure that it didn't trigger any fraud warnings to block the transaction. So if this is all true, what would happen is when they went to enter my email address, I even tested this myself on another Shopify legitimate website. When you enter your email address, if the Shopify backend sees that you have a Shopify account info, it actually automatically sends a Shop Pay code to your phone. No matter what. There's no selecting to send it, it just automatically sends it. So they probably entered that in, and without a choice, it sent a text message to my phone. But here's the key. It's not required to use the code to autofill the page. The code is just to autofill, but they already had it, so they just filled it in themselves, which would explain the 3-minute difference between when I got the text message and when the order actually went through and I got the email. So it turns out, and this is a fact, what I thought was a 2-factor authentication code was more of just a convenience code. It's not required to make the purchase, and they didn't need it because they had all my other info and billing info that they just put in and were able to place the order by entering it manually. And by the way, I do not believe this is any vulnerability with Shopify itself. If you had entered my correct info and credit card info and shipping address into any website with all that being correct, the order would have went through. The reason they had to set up their own site is because they did not intend to ship anything out, and if they had to use my correct shipping address, well, then they weren't going to get anything that they bought with my card, so they had to set up their own site so the money would go directly to them. And the fact that the text message was sent to me was more of just a side effect of them using Shopify as a platform for this scam. And I just thought this was really interesting because I've never seen this before, where someone would set up an entire website with Shopify just to be able to harvest credit card details, but it makes complete sense. And actually, I think it's kind of dumb for the scammers to be using Shopify, because obviously if they enter a customer's info, then they're going to get a confirmation email with this order that they can immediately see, oh, I didn't place this order. It's not like they have to look at their credit card statement. So it actually tipped me off earlier than if they would have placed it some other place. The unfortunate thing is you can't really defend against this type of scam except retroactively and get refunded from the credit card company, because obviously they could do this anywhere. However, if anyone from Shopify is watching, I do have a major feature request, which is two-factor authentication requirement as an optional feature for customers, where on any Shopify site, if you're going to place the order, require that the text message code be entered before the order goes through at all, not just the autofill. That would be awesome. Now, Shopify does have a two-factor authentication feature, but I believe it's only for store owners, not customers. In fact, Shopify doesn't really allow you to access the profile of customers at all. It kind of just gets entered when you place an order, and it's all stored in the back end. You can't like log into Shopify directly and change your order info or mailing address, anything like that. So I wish there was some sort of back end account you could do customizations like that for Shopify customers. But until that becomes the case, there's really unfortunately no way to defend against this, just like you couldn't any other kind of credit card fraud. You just have to kind of let your credit card company know if this happens. In any case though, hopefully you guys are now aware of this. I thought it was interesting how I believe they did this, but if you want to keep watching, I did make another video recently talking about 7 new scams in 2020 to watch out for, so I'll put that link right here if you just want to click on that. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. It's 2021, and just like every previous year, it seems like scammers are just becoming even more prevalent. So I'm gonna go over in this video a bunch of different scams that are either brand new that I really have never heard of, or that are becoming at least more prevalent, even if they're not exactly new, so you still need to be on the watch for them this year. So starting off, we have the so-called car wrap scam, and in this one, you'll either see some kind of job posting or maybe even get an email or see an advertisement for something that claims to be able to pay you to just drive your car around. And the idea is that you'll answer this ad and they'll say, yeah, all you have to do is put an advertisement car wrap logo on your car, drive it around like you normally would, and we'll pay you several $100s a week for that. If you accept this, they'll usually send you a check that is a bogus check for a few $1,000s. It will initially cash in the bank before they realize it's fraudulent, but in the meantime, they will tell you, oh, use this money and go to our supplier who's a specialist in car wraps and just give him the money and pay him and he'll handle it. And they'll tell you to do this in some way that's not really reversible, like a wire transfer or a money order, something like that. At some point, probably not too long after you make this payment to this so-called specialist who just is part of the scam, then the bank will realize that the check is fraudulent after a couple days, and then they'll deduct that money out of your account because it never should have been deposited. So then you're out both the money that was deposited from the check and whatever money you have sent to the scammer, so you lost it all. So again, this is just another variation of the fake check scam. Always be wary of any company that says, we're gonna send you a check and you go and use that to buy something. That's kind of sketchy. All right, next up we have the so-called family emergency scams. You may have heard of these. These have been around for a while, but apparently they're becoming a lot more prevalent. With this one, you'll get a phone call claiming to be a relative of yours, and they're in some kind of emergency that requires you to give them money. This is often like they're out of town on vacation and they just got arrested and they need money for bail, for example, is a common one. This scam frequently targets older people, and then they'll pretend to be grandkids, and they'll say, oh, grandpa, grandma, I'm in jail, I need a bail, whatever, and then they'll also say something like, please don't tell mom and dad, they'll be so mad, please just send the money over now and I'll sort it out and then tell them. And the idea is to get them to send the money before confirming this story with anyone to find out if this person is even out of town at all. So they try to get you to urgently send the money for whatever reason. It's always very urgent. They need the money now. Maybe the hearing is tomorrow and they need the money for a lawyer, or they need to get out of jail now because, I don't know, there's scary people in jail, that sort of thing. And these scammers are more clever than you may think. I saw one post where someone questioned why they sound different. They're like, you don't sound like my grandson. And they said, oh, well, I broke my nose while being arrested, and that's the reason I sound different. So needless to say, if you ever receive a phone call from anyone, even someone you know, claiming to need money right away and you need to wire the money or something else like that, it's best to, first of all, not answer any phone call from a number you don't recognize, but at least verify the story somehow and know that this is a scam going around. So if you do get a phone call from someone needing bail, it probably is a scam. All right, moving on. The next scam is fake phone calls from people claiming to be Apple or Amazon support. This is basically a variation of the fake order confirmation scams you may have heard of in the past. Usually this, up until now, they would have been an email. They send you a fake order confirmation and they say to cancel this order, go in here, and it's a phishing thing. Well, this is different. They actually call you up on the phone and do a robocall, and they may say something like, this is Amazon support and this is alerting you to an unauthorized purchase of an iPhone for $1,000. Press 1 to talk to customer service to cancel this, and of course if you pick up and you're like, oh, I didn't order that, you press 1, you talk to a scammer, and then they'll usually ask for your credentials. They'll try to get your bank account number to say, oh, to cancel this we need your original credit card info, anything like that. But just know that it's a scam. And actually the FTC does have a couple sample audio clips. I'll play one right now to kind of get an idea of what this might sound like.
An unauthorized purchase of an iPhone XR 64 gigabytes for $749 is being ordered from your Amazon account. To cancel your order, or to connect with one of our customer support representatives, please press 1 or simply stay on the line.
So that's just one example for Amazon, but apparently Apple is another one that scammers are using. They'll call you up, again, with some kind of robocall and say something like, there's unauthorized access to your iCloud account. Again, press 1 or talk to customer service or call this number to access customer service, and then you go and you connect to a scammer. So if you get one of these phone calls, never call the number that they tell you. Just, if you're really unsure about it, then go on Amazon or Apple's official website and contact them through the official number listed on the website, not some to your iCloud account. Again, press 1 or talk to customer service or call this number to access customer service, and then you go and you connect to a scammer. So if you get one of these phone calls, never call the number that they tell you. Just, if you're really unsure about it, then go on Amazon or Apple's official website and contact them through the official number listed on the website, not some number that a phone call gives you, because it could be fake. As a side note, if you ever get a robocall from this type of scam or any other, never press any numbers on the phone. Just hang up right away, because if they hear you press the number, then they know now that it's a live working number, and then that may be added to a list, and you'll start getting even more and more spam calls. So it's best to just not answer if you don't recognize it, and just hang up immediately when you realize it's a scam. All right, now the next type of scam is the overpaid utility bill scam. And with this one, you'll get some kind of phone call, usually a robocall, maybe a voicemail, that'll say, hey, you overpaid your latest electricity bill or whatever, and you're eligible for a cash refund. All you have to do is press 1 or call this number to talk to customer service. It might not be a cash refund. They might say, oh, well, confirm it and we'll apply a discount to your next bill, something like that. Of course, when you press 1 or connect to this customer service, who's actually the scammer, then they'll usually require some kind of confirmation for the payment in the form of your bank account number, where to deposit. We need to know where to deposit the money, or something like that. Your personal information that they'll use to steal your identity, any type of thing they'll be able to collect from you. And even in the best case scenario, where it's not an outright thief trying to steal your money away, at the best case scenario, it's like a really sketchy marketing company trying to get you to switch to their crap utility company, and they're basically still lying, so you don't want to even interact with them. They're still using sketchy, lying marketing tactics, so it's either a scam or someone you don't want to deal with anyway. All right, moving on, I think we're on to number 5. We have the so-called package waiting scam, and what's new about this is they've been actually sending out text messages, where previously it's a variation of kind of like a fake order confirmation email you receive, like I mentioned before, but now you may start getting text